If you like these videos, please check out my full course at www.lsat.totaltestprep.net with tons of clearly explained actual LSAT questions written by someone who's mastered test and helped others master it, and an evaluation period where you only pay if you want to continue.
All right, so in this video, we'll cover the analogy question. So what is the analogy question? So what does the analogy question ask for? In other words, how is it phrased? What does it test? And how do we approach it? So looking at our basic information here, we've got some examples of the way these questions are phrased. So based on the passage, which of the following is most clearly an instance of the objectivist approach to studying the mind? Or which one of the following is most closely analogous to the debate described in the hypothetical example given by the author in the fourth paragraph? Or in which one of the following is the use of cotton fibers or cotton cloth most analogous to Kingston's use of the English language as described in lines 51 and 55? So, question will most likely include the word analogous or analogy, but that's actually not necessary. If you look at, for example, the first question based on the passage, which one of the following is most clearly an instance of the objectivist approach to studying the mind, it asks for an example. So it's something that is along the lines of an example or a situation that is similar in some fundamental respects, which is what an analogy is. So if you don't find the word analogy, it could still fall within this question category. The answer choices will contain information on a topic that is not in the passage. So that is the important thing. You're going to deal with a situation where your answer choices are going to be an example of more general information from the passage. And so you'll have something that is not directly talked about in the passage, but is a related a related case or an example. These principal analogy questions appear relatively frequently, once every couple of passages, and these questions tend to be more specific than general. So the questions are going to ask you to look at a more or less narrow area of the text to find the corresponding analogy in the choices. Okay. So these principal analogy, and I'm adding the word principal because these are examples of situations where you'll be asked to find an example of a particular more general rule or more general principle. Maybe find an example or find an analogous example. So these questions test your ability to understand the more abstract relationships between the information and concepts presented in the text. So you're going to be given answer choices that deal with topics not mentioned in the text, and the point is to figure out which ones are parallel to the information in the text at an abstract level. So in other words, which ones are examples or analogous situations to the information in the text at an abstract level. So these questions are similar to the principal and principal scenario questions in the arguments section. You generally won't be dealing with arguments in these questions, but instead with areas of the text that develop a certain concept or element of the overall argument. Now, in terms of the basic approach, the most important thing is to have a good understanding of what the question is asking you to find the analogy for. So you won't be able to come up with a potential answer, but you'll need a good understanding of what you're being asked about in order to evaluate the choices. So first, evaluate the element that you're being asked to find an analogy to. How is it presented and defined, and what is its function within the passage as a whole? Then come up with an abstract definition or description that breaks down the element into different parts. Then go through the answer choices one by one and evaluate to see which one is most parallel to what you've established about the element in the question. Now, the information in the choices is going to be new and off topic, so you're looking to see if the abstract relationships are analogous. In terms of the right answer and wrong answer, right answers will provide something that fits the abstractions developed for the elements from the question. Different parts of the element in the text will be parallel with the parts of the analogous scenario in the answer choice. And the wrong answers will not capture the correct relationships and abstractions. Some of the wrong answers may seem tempting because they may deal with information that's similar to the information in the text, but content isn't what's important. It's the relationships behind the content that are important. Okay, in terms of a quick summary, The basic approach is to have a good idea of what the question is asking about, so to define and describe it and pay attention to how it's related to the rest of the passage, and then use that information to evaluate the answer choices one by one, paying attention to the abstractions and not the content of the choices.